This is Rebecca Jernigan, your tour guide into discoveries, coming to you live from the heart of America to around the globe via the World Wide Web, satellite, and podcast. Let's journey together into the realms of the known to the unknown in search of enlightenment, knowledge, and truth. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet Earth. This is your host, Rebecca Jernigan, and you're listening to Journeys with Rebecca right here on wolfspiritradio.com and also being simulcast on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com Studio B. Please do remember that both of the stations, Wolf Spirit Radio and Freedom Slips, are totally listener supported. So any donations really make a great difference. It allows all the wonderful hosts and their shows and their guests to continue to provide you with the best and latest information. And of course, it's not going to be mainstream. And don't forget to visit my website, that's journeyswithrebecca.com, and check out the archives, upcoming guests, and the topics, classes, workshops that I offer, as well as setting an appointment for your session with me. And as always, the free newsletter is there for you to sign up. You'll find all of those on the left sidebar on each page that you visit. And I'm going to be doing a revamp of my website over the next few weeks. I'm going to be adding some audio content, which I have some information on that I'll be sharing soon, and some written content, as well as streamlining it a bit more. So look for those changes. Lots and lots of changes. It's going to be a really great show tonight. However, there is a change of venue. And as I've said in the past, welcome to the new normal, because everything that you thought you knew before is all going to be different now. My guest tonight was to be Evan and Steve Strong, out of Australia. And they're literally in Australia. I do believe we have had a time zone misunderstanding. And they are not going to be with us tonight, but fear not, because we have a wonderful person with us. He's here with me almost every show. In the background, you sometimes don't even know he's here, but it's Tobias Burrell, and we're going to be speaking with him. We're going to have just a kind of an off-the-cuff night, because obviously this wasn't a planned show. Again, it's the new normal. I have to actually kind of giggle about this. I really do, because I kept hearing all day that this day wasn't going to go as planned, and sure enough, it did not go as planned. And I had been trying to communicate with my guest. They must not have picked up their emails or their messages, and so I kind of just figured that this was probably not going to happen the way that we had hoped and anticipated and also planned for. But fear not, I will be having them on, because they are really fantastic people, Evan and Steve. They are father and son. And I think their story and their information, their facts, their research, and all of that we're going to be bringing forth is really going to be truly a very unique show. So please look for the announcements on the reschedule of that. And again, those will be in my newsletter. So if you're not getting it, it might be a good idea to pop over to journeyswithrebecca.com and sign up for it, so that you can get those. They're sporadic. They're not on any kind of a complete schedule. Usually no more than 2 or 3 times a month where you'll get an update from me, unless there has been some changes. But as always, you can check on the show archive or the show page, the broadcast page, and it will also tell you the changes if I've known it in time to change them up for you. So, but right now, let's go ahead and open up Tobias's mic. Hi, Tobias.
Hey, Rebecca, how are you?
I'm living the new normal. I am. It's great. It's great fun. It's a challenge every day. Every day it's a challenge, and it's not a negative. People think when you say that's a negative statement. That's not how I view challenges. I view them as opportunities, right? Okay, what have I learned here today?
Well, I like your optimistic approach with that. It's fair, and I like it a lot. It's sort of when I say to people, no, I'm abnormal. It's not a negative thing neither. It just means a little bit different.
We're a little left of center, honey.
You got it.
And I'm all good with that. So I waited until the very last minute because you really don't know what somebody's doing in their office or their home or wherever their computer is. So I waited till the last minute. So we really do not have anything planned specific in which to talk about. But there was a few topics that I kind of wanted to broach tonight because I've had some clients recently that have also had some of the same sort of instances go on, and one of them is as we call it, is the Mandela effect, how that's actually been changing, and people that weren't aware of it before are now being aware of it, and call it what you will, and some people don't agree with that term, and that's okay. I'm just using it as kind of just as a term to use. It's not supposed to be written in stone, and it's
a placeholder.
Thank you. And there's my
we also have a
JP.
caller. Do you want a caller?
Oh, well, yeah, that would be okay. We go ahead and take a call tonight.
Okay, so let me just bring this caller in. Now you should be able to hear them. Let me just click this button here and bring up this fader here. And caller, you're on the line. You're on air with Rebecca Jernigan. Who's that and where are you?
Hello?
Hello, and they've gone. All that, after all that.
Oh, and you had such a lovely introduction. Well, maybe
I know, it was good. It's a practice.
Yeah. Well, if we get some more calls, that'd be lovely. I know that Tobias and I had a show scheduled for May 8th, and that's what the show was going to be about. We were going to talk for a few minutes, and then we were going to open up phone lines and chat lines and let people ask us questions of us. So, if anybody wants to chime in, if they have a question tonight for Tobias or myself, this is a golden opportunity. It's a great time. We'll see what shakes out on May 8th. We may have another one. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right?
You bet. I'm in for it.
I am too. I'm up for it. So let's talk about these, these kind of Mandela effect. People have, all over have been, a lot of my people, I don't know if yours are doing the same thing, yours, Tobias, or yours either, JP, but where they're having real specific understandings of time differences, looking up at the clock, and as an example, let's say it's 11 o'clock, and they look back again and it may be 9. So the time has gone backwards, not forwards. Some people may look up at 11 o'clock and they've done just a ton of work, whatever that work is would have normally taken them 3 or 4 hours, and it's 11:15. So there's some shifting, major shifting going on with the timelines and the time frames. And then what is the occurrences that happen when we experience those time anomalies, right? What's the back end of that? What shows up later? Well, that's the most interesting thing. My understanding is, from what I've been they've shared with me, and from my own just kind of delving into this topic, because I have a lot of different instances of that. And so it's not just a source of curiosity, it's also a source of information. What happens in these time anomalies? Well, if you go backwards in time, it can sometimes represent that a different reality, and it's not so different that you don't recognize it, but a different reality, a different course lines up for you. You're going out into the future, into a slightly altered timeline than what you were on before. When you have those other anomalies where you're doing 4 or 5 hours worth of work and only 15 minutes goes by, that's a different kind of anomaly. That's where you're kind of in a almost a void space where you're actually accomplishing more in a short period of time, but time is moving so slowly that you don't recognize that it's moving that slowly because you're very occupied and busy. It can also represent, too, as well as a shift in the direction of what happens for you. Now, these differences are so subtle. It's not like they're not like major life changes that happen, but they are a different way of what shows up down the road. And they can be the next day, the same day, it can be a week, a month, 2 months down the road. But pay attention to those who are aware enough. Pay attention to how these time fluctuations, anomalies are happening. If they're happening to you, it could be kind of a product of all of these energetics that we're getting as well that's coming in. Do you have clients yourself, Tobias, that are talking about the time thing?
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's, like you were saying, there's so many different levels to it. And it's hard to really understand how they all connect. You know, we have deja vu, we have premonitions, we have the time examples that you gave, and then we have information that doesn't jive between these sort of slips, right? So yeah, it's a matter of people trying to sort of place how they all fit together, and in fact the other way, if there's a distinction between them and what that distinction is.
Yeah, and I think only by being observant and continuing to be observant will you really begin to recognize if there are any changes that do happen on account of the slippages or anomalies, whatever you want to call it. The other thing that I've been experiencing, I've had 4 of them this year alone. And the first time it happened, I thought it was pretty magnanimous. And when the second time happened, I was really extremely surprised. But by the 4th time, I'm like, well, there's something to this. The deja vu. Having the deja vu. But here's the strangest thing, is that I'm having deja vu about my deja vu.
Wow.
Now, yeah, I'm like, okay, well, how does that happen? I don't know how that happens, but how do you have deja vu about your deja vu? So there's something going on with that.
There's a lot going on with that, and it gets more complex and more complex, doesn't it? And you know what? When you said that, it occurred to me that that's happened to me as well, more than one time. I've had a deja vu about a deja vu. Now, what up with that, right?
But did you have a deja vu about Rebecca telling you about the double deja vu?
That would have been too perfect.
No, it's just, it's super weird, you know, because look, let's look at it this way. So I remember years ago, you know, or anytime there's still people that talk about this, but years ago for myself, I was trying to figure out the difference between a psychic impression and my own thought. And I think a lot of people go through that.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's a process in and of itself. But then we get into what we're talking about right now, and it's multi-level. It's multi-level. And not just that, it's multi-dimensions, it's multi-mind-blowing, and it's just multi-mind-twisting sometimes. So yeah, it's worth the exploration.
Yeah, and it is. I think all of these different types of anomalies that happen, no matter what we're talking about, like even my dreams the last probably 2 to 3 weeks have shifted. I call them dreams. And then I always say this every time. I call them dreams. They're really night experiences. And I call them that because that's what they are. I'm experiencing it. So let me tell you about this one, because this one's pretty indicative of how unusual that this has become. It starts out where I'm in a basement. Now, if you're doing dream interpretations, I already understand this, but let me tell you the whole story here before everyone starts trying to figure this out, because it's actually quite cool. So I'm down in this basement, and there's all these other beings down there with me. Now, the most interesting thing is that most of them are silhouetted. In other words, I cannot see their features, but I'm not quite sure, but I think that I'm actually looking at spirit entities when I'm down in this basement. And then when you look down in this basement, there's this flowing stream, right? But this stream is made out of something that looks like wet flowing cement, right? Very interesting. So I go and stand in this, and I pull my feet out of it, and I'm up to about my knees in this stream, and I pull myself out of it, and I run up these stairs. So I'm upstairs now with this cement on my legs, and I crack the cement off, and I pull, like it would be like a boot, if you would. I pull it off and I set it down. That's between me and the outside layer of the cement, right? The cement that stood up, and it's white. So I look at this and I get this idea, and I go back downstairs to the basement. By the way, this is not I'm not revisiting any place that I've knowingly been in this timeline. So it's not a childhood thing or any of that. So go back down in this basement, and here's all these people, and they're still standing there, and they're staring at me, and I get this idea that they're waiting for me to figure something out. So I go in the stream, and I get waist deep into the cement, and I go run back upstairs. I do the same thing. I keep doing this until I come back down into the basement, and I get fully drenched from head to toe in this cement, and I go up the stairs, and I break off the cement, and I take this other thing off of me, and it's a carbon copy of me, but only it's all in white. So it puzzled me, and I spoke with a friend of mine today about it, and it puzzled me, and I thought I knew what it was. And then, of course, when you talk to somebody, it kind of gets expanded, and then you kind of get, yeah, I should have seen that. But what it is pulling the muck and the dirt up, if you will, and cleaning it off. It's like, okay, I'm done with that. That one's over with, right? So here was what was underneath it. What was on the outside of it was gunk and dirt, or cement in this case, which is dirty, right? It's made from a product of the earth, right? So it's dirt. And inside of that is something that's the opposite of that, which is clean and white and purified, that kind of a thing. So to me, it's indicative of these energies and this new wave, if you will, of energies incoming into this planet from the solar system as well as from the sun. So there's a lot of different other things that I could be explaining as well, different night experiences, but that one was the most unique because of what was actually transpiring during the course of that. And, when I got all done, by the way, they all started clapping. It was, like, she got it. Running up and down them stairs, boy, I had a workout, let me tell you.
It's a good thing you're only dreaming.
Yeah, for sure. And,
or whatever. That is, but we had that once, didn't we? You took me on a regression. I came back and my guides were clapping.
Yes, they do that. Isn't that fabulous?
I love that.
Yeah. Tobias, take it over for just a minute and chat, if you will.
Well, again, I don't know. It's interesting because we have these experiences, and it always reminds me of when people talk about the different dimensions. We talk about dreams, or we talk about, night experiences, and I think it's always fascinating to sort of explore the relationship between the physical world, right? So you've already put that sort of into place with what it meant with the changing of the, energies and everything, et cetera. Wow. Let me tell you, I'm going to tell you an experience I had the other night. And this is about sort of the time slip again. So I went to a restaurant with some friends and had a wonderful evening. And at the end of the night, I went up to the cash register to pay for the bill. And there were three options on the cash register, or not the cash register, but on the debit machine for giving a tip. And I clearly saw it was 15%, 20%, or 30%. And there was a fourth option where you could just enter your own amount or percentage, right? So I actually showed a friend of mine that was standing there. I said, look at this. Which one should I do? And I said that the 30% one. And he said, no, just push the fourth option and just enter your own amount. So I did that. Then, on the way out of the restaurant, I got into my car with my friends, and somehow it came up again. And I said, I said to my friend, well, I could have just pushed the third option, which is the 30%. And he said, what are you talking about? It said 25%. So that may seem like just a little thing that's not a big deal, but I'm telling you, it escalated into this huge deal, like this huge thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm positive that it was 30%. And he said, what are you talking about? I am positive it was 25%. I'm like, no. And then he did the math because it had the amount beside it. And we got into this whole big discussion. I will call it a discussion. It was a little out there, but I mean, what is going on with these things? Is there something happening in our heads and we're seeing things differently, or is there actually more than one thing happening in the same time in the same space?
Well, now see, these are some of the questions that we really need to kind of flow back and forth with. And these are some of the things. So for everyone listening, and this goes for you too, Tobias, our guests did show up. They just now showed up. So
Good.
what we're going to do here is we're going to bring them in just a moment. I'm going to tell you about them first. But these are some of the topics that Tobias and I are going to be covering on May 8th. That's when the show is. We will be doing call-ins and we will be doing a question and answer session. There's a ton more of information that we're wanting to share with you as well. So we will be doing that also in the May 8th show. If you have a question, however, and you can't watch the live show on May 8th and you have a question for myself or for Tobias, you can always send me an email to journeyswithrebecca@yahoo.com, and I'll read it on the air along with the answer. We'll answer the question for you, and then you can listen to it when it goes back up into the archives. So our guest, Evan and Steve, are with us tonight, and let me give you a little bit more information about what the topic was for tonight. Their book was Between a Rock and a Hard Place, the Out of Australia Theory, I can't speak, where science and myth become one and the same. It's often been said that humanity's history is a fabrication, littered with lies and omissions, but this has never been conclusively proven until now. What has been recently found in Australia is unequivocally a rewriting of convenient versions of ancient history and the genesis of modern humans. We can now verify that the original elders and custodians of the old way are correct in insisting that Australia is the cradle of humanity and that all peoples of the world come from us. But it doesn't end there. Religion, art, burial, sailing, astronomy, navigation, democracy, gender equality, and all the nobler hallmarks of civilized behavior are original blessings exported from Australia. I want to take this time now and say how much I appreciate Steve and Evan for being with us tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show. We'll pick up again with Tobias, again, May 8th. Don't forget that. Save that date and come back, and we're going to have a really wonderful discussion. In the meantime, welcome to Steve and to Evan.
Hi, g'day. How are you, Rebecca?
Hi.
Hello, gentlemen, and how are you?
Well, thank you. Yourself?
Not too bad, and just so excited to have you here, and again, discussing this extremely, I don't know, it's an extremely in-depth topic. The whole theory of, that Africa was the cradle of humanity, always that, and believe it or not, that didn't always ring true. I believe that there was, certainly something very magnanimous that went on in Africa, and they're just not even touched the tip of the iceberg with discovering that. But your discoveries are just absolutely fantastic, and I am going to give this back to you guys to bring everyone into this and tell us the story about what you have found. And your website, again, I had it up and I took it down so that I can get to it again, is forgottenorigin.com, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to post that also into the chat room, and, if people have questions, they write us in all cap letters. and we can certainly get those questions answered for you guys, for whoever writes in a little bit later in the show after Steve and Evan have had a chance to share with us this really fascinating information.
Well, let me start by first of all saying thank you, Rebecca, and just so that your listeners understand, you actually wrote to us about 3 times to see if we could send across the copy of our new book. And we did ask for it to be sent across, and it didn't get to you, so you're doing this one a little bit difficultly because you really are doing this basically on, a wing and a prayer to an extent. So thank you so much for trying this under the trying conditions you faced up with, and I know it's a bit difficult.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet of you to say. Thank you.
Well, I am aware of the fact that we did try a few times. I don't know what Hampton Road did, but I did ask them more than once, but they must have been asleep at the wheel on that particular day. That's okay. We all have our slip-ups.
It's the new normal. What can you say, right?
Yeah. Well, look, it is a very complex story because what we're trying to tell people is that, and I'm going to say this because it's true, because we know mainstream is fully aware of a lot of the information we have both here and elsewhere. What we're saying is basically the people in control have been lying to you about where you came from, your ancestry, your role in life and what you were put on this planet for. All those things have been taken away because, as many people have said many times, you can only work out where you're going to if you know where you've come from. Well, if you've been lied about where you came from, who you came from, when you came and how it came about, it doesn't give us much hope for the future, does it? Because we don't know. We don't fully understand what our purpose on this planet is. So what we're finding in the archaeology in Australia is that not only does it reset the parameters about who, when and where, but it also gives us a different mindset as to who we really are. And if I can very quickly touch on that one first, because I think it's very important, otherwise it's just another dry history account. People have got to understand that the history we're finding and the elders are sharing with us tells us that we are not, as we're lied to today, warlike beings that basically spent 50 cents in every dollar on this planet trying to either kill someone or protect ourselves from killing someone we think might be around the corner. That most of our history has been that of cooperative, spiritual, truth-seeking beings that work individually from each other and find their own salvation and fully understand why we're here. Now, there have been about 4 occasions where technology has taken control of this planet and we've had to sit back and watch it, and on each occasion it fell apart. And we're now in the last cycle of this boom and bust, and after this we're told that humanity will finally start to embrace its true purpose. So really what we're trying to do is we've got plenty of archaeology, we've got plenty of genetics, and we've got all those things we've set out. But most importantly, we're trying to teach people and show people that I'm afraid the people up front, up top, know the real story and don't want it out. They're much happier us living inside a sort of paradigm where we believe we came out of the jungles of Africa, it was survival of the fittest, and we as Homo sapiens wiped out all the other hominids, and we alone stand on the top of the pyramid, and we stand above the pyramid. Well, the original people have a completely different story, and I'm afraid that's not the one we should be talking about.
So let me share with the audience a little something here, if I may. You were on my show, I don't even remember how many years ago, but it was a few years ago. And then you guys were really doing a lot of archaeological digs. You were talking, at that point you were just beginning, I think, really starting to talk to the elders, and you were compiling information. You shared with us the caves, the place that you took that it appears that only females were able to actually go into this healing chamber or cave or what have you. That was very fascinating, by the way. And seriously, if I had the money, I would get on a plane and come out there just to experience some of those things that you guys have, shown us through your words and your own experiences from being there. But I know you were compiling this information, from a while ago, pulling it in, and then you alluded, and I'm just kind of telling tale on you here. You alluded that you had a lot more information, that there was a lot of wrong information out there, and that you and your son would be pulling in some additional facts and figures and research, and you were really excited. You just had a ton of energy about what it was that you guys were discovering and the elders that you were speaking with. So this is really fantastic to get a different viewpoint. And I like the way you just kind of laid that right out there. You just laid it out and you said, this is what's happened. And I've always said, you can't make an intelligent decision if you don't have all the information. How can you make those choices for yourself if you don't really know what the choice is that you have to make? Except for what you've been told, right? So, this thing about putting humanity down is because the powers that were, that's why I choose to look at them. I don't choose to give them any more power, because heavens knows they take enough of as it is. The powers that were, don't want the humanity to raise above itself. They don't want us to know our true roots, our true nature, and this whole, I call it the construct, which some people call it the matrix of programming that's out there, we've been inundated with for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. So
yes,
just to say, I'm very grateful for you guys. Yeah, I'm just very grateful for you guys coming on and talking to us. So let's start from the viewpoint of, if we can, the elders, the information, and I'm hoping maybe I might have triggered some memories there about how long ago it was that we talked, when you were sharing the information about the elders and the healing cave and et cetera and so forth. If you kind of give us some information about the elders, where their information comes from, what they were willing to impart upon you, and that kind of thing, and then we can just kind of get into the whole genetics thing. That's fascinating in itself.
Yeah, look, thanks very much for giving us a fill up where we're up to, because that made it easy for us, didn't it?
Oh, we're just looking at each other going,
oh, thank goodness we know we're up to. Yeah, look, there's been a lot. There's been a lot that's come through, but I think it's a good idea. Let us first give a description of the character of the people who've been giving us this information, and let's talk about the information next. And I think the best way to do that, as you'll find through the whole of this show, we'll always refer to elders we've been in contact with, because we are meant to act as interlocutors, as to pass on their story. And two come to mind immediately, and we can pick quite a few elders. And what I want to try and share with you in the next two stories is they're both true. I know they may sound a little bit bizarre and right out there, but what I want to say is that the elder I'm going to talk about is made of flesh and bone. He's not perfect. Right? When it comes to cultural stuff, well, that's a different story. But as a human being, like all of us, he has his flaws. But what I want people to understand is that what we're going to talk about is the potential of every human being on the planet. And Kano made this clear many times. I think the best way to go further is, let me give you two examples of what's happened to us since we spoke to you, where one of the elders has shown us what exactly it is they're trying to offer the rest of the world. Now, on the first occasion, and Evan, that'll involve you a bit too.
Yeah.
Evan, you went into the cave of the owl, didn't you?
Yeah. So I went into this cave and,
remember, by the way, let me start by saying that this was the one occasion where we couldn't smoke ourselves because our elder for down there, Auntie Bev, was not well. So we did an alternate ceremony I was given by another elder. And then, Evan, you went in, didn't you?
Yeah, I went in first, and this owl flew out of the cave and left me a feather as it went, and, there was paintings in the cave and all that stuff. And off it took.
And we worked for the day, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We did. It was like a little spot that Klaus Donner had told us to go to.
And then what happened later? You got a phone call on that machine, didn't you?
Usually what happens is when Dad's got to talk to an elder, I get a phone call, and then it's like, you need to phone Kana. This time it was him on the phone saying, I need to talk to Stephen.
And that was bad news. You've got to remember, because normally what happens with our elders, an interlocutor will ring up and say, you must contact the elder. And that's all good because we know it's going to be nice and happy and really well. This time it wasn't. He was not happy. And what he said was this. Now, remember this phone call was taken from a place called Carter, Kangaroo Island, which is 3,500 kilometres from where we were. And we came off country 4 hours before. And he said to me straight away, you've been on country. I said, well, yeah, I have, but it's not your country. He said, it doesn't matter. He said, I have a kangaroo here telling me what you did. He said, you didn't smoke yourself today, did you? And I said, well, no, I didn't, but I did. He said, don't tell me about the other ceremony. He said, I already know about that. He said, the only reason I'm talking to you and you're not dead is because you did that. He said, but they're not happy. And Evan, you got cursed for about 4 years from this one, didn't you?
Probably, and I stole the other one.
Yeah. And he said, he's not happy at all. And he said, told me this, he said, if you ever go on the country again and you don't smoke yourself, you will die on that country. That's your only warning. And then he hung up. Now, my point is this, ladies and gentlemen. He is 3,500 k's away. The owl went out, told another animal, and told another animal, and lo and behold, told the kangaroo, and he was talking to the kangaroo and telling me things that he had never, ever seen. There is no way he saw this because he wasn't there. Now, how did he manage to talk to those animals? Bearing in mind, they were delivered at a rate of around 9,000 k's per hour, 900 k's per hour to get that distance in that time. So whatever form of postal service he's using is damn sight better than what you Americans or Australians have, and it works much better because it's passed on from animal to animal, and they don't lie. Now, that's one example of what we really like. Now, the second one is more dramatic because there's a gentleman by the name of Graham Hancock who was there at the time when it happened. Now, we spent 6 days together, and on the last day he went on the country, and there, the same elder came dressed up the old way, all the paint, did the whispering song and spoken language, and then walked back a step. We all watched him and walked back the second step and completely disappeared in front of all of us. Wow. Now, we asked his wife later, how did he do this? And she says, I've no idea. I've never seen that before. And finally someone, I don't know who it was, managed to get up the gumption to ask Kano. And his answer was, and it's a very important answer, is he said, I come from both ways. Now, that's the clue. You see, the original people, and I'm going to include the Hopi, the Navajo, and all the indigenous people from way back, came from both ways. They could walk both sides of that curtain that's been rammed up in front of us now, and we can't see the truth. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are the people today that still have this knowledge. And I'll close this with that after Kano's moved off, about a week ago, we put the sacred rocks into formation, into ceremony, just to let you people know it's not just one person like this. And I put him in ceremony, and we put an elder inside the rocks. I then get a phone call as that person sits inside the rocks, and it is the female equivalent of Kano, saying, I've been waiting 3 weeks to ring you. I'm now ringing you because you've just put the rocks in circle and you've sat someone inside. And I said, well, how did you know that? He said, that's why I'm ringing. Now I have some information to give you, which I can't share with you now. But what's important, ladies and gentlemen, in all 3 cases, 2 different original people did things that every science book in this country denies exists. But guess what? They are wrong. And this is the point we're on about here. Not only is their history wrong, but they've lied to us about the real science. I mean, the quantum physicists have got a bit of an idea what they're talking about. The rest have got no idea. The books tell me you can't talk to animals. Kano did, didn't you?
He certainly did.
Right. The books tell me you don't know 3,500 k's away when I'm putting rocks on the ground and someone's sitting inside. But this lady, whose name I can't mention because she's just as important as Kano, probably more so because she's a woman, she knew it, but the books say she doesn't. So my point is this. Somebody's wrong here. Either the people of the old way are wrong or the books are right. They both can't be the same. And what I'd like to say is if I have a choice between getting a flash new flat screen TV, or a brand new computer, or learning how to disappear and reappear, or talk to the animals, I know which one I'm putting my hand up for. I want that one. I want the second one, because my flat screen TV is going to wear out in 5 years. But the stuff that Kano did and what this other woman did, remember this. Every one of us, Evan, your rabbit is eating your curtain again. We have a mischievous rabbit here. Every one of these things I speak about, they both told me, why don't you do the same? And that also includes Evan, it includes you, and it includes everyone listening. The elders want to teach us that we are magic. The scientists want to teach us there is no magic. We have to pick now. One of them's right and one of them's wrong. But I can tell you, if we talk about the archaeology, you'll find out that the original people don't just have channeling and reading from a distance as their truth. They also have genetics. They also have archaeology, and they also have history as their truth too. And what they're telling the world is the way you mob are living is no good. The way they lived and want to live again is the way we all should be living. So this is a story not just about history, it's about our birthright and our ancestry, which has been stolen from us over the last 5,000 to 6,000 years. Over the period where we started to fight each other again, where men took over control, where money came into play and we fought against nature and it became a contest between us and them. And every time we fought harder, we lost more of our magic. Remember, in a regional society, the belief is that every human being in every tribe has magic. You have to find your magic and develop it. Today, when the kiddies go to school, I am a school teacher, and I've been to many schools, both in primary and high school. I am yet to wander into a magic reconnection class yet.
Well, I think the closest thing that I ever saw to that in regards to the schooling was I had a gentleman on my show in 2008, and he had went to some schools over in the UK somewhere where the students designed the school. They designed the curriculum. They grew their own vegetables. They learned about nature. They were able to do graphic painting on the inside of the walls. Some of the most forward-thinking, loving, beautiful children and that you'd ever want to meet. And it was because they were tapped in and they weren't polluted with the onslaught of the constant lies and the constant illusions that we are currently experiencing on this planet.
I'll bring that on because that's what it should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's the only place.
In our system in Australia, our children are given statewide tests when they're 7. And they get statewide tests every year from now, or every second year, and then in high school every year. So the whole of the time they're in school, all they are doing is in competition, not in collaboration, but in competition with each other, and they get ordered from the top to the bottom. And in every class, somebody comes last. And as soon as you have a system like that, you basically make it so the children, what you're talking about is perfect education. What I'm talking about is not education, it's brainwashing and creating fear inside the children. And once those children become fearful, they've got them. That's the whole point of this, got them. And this has been going on now. This is what we found in our history. What we're trying to tell people is we're not just talking about history. We're talking about original timeline goes in a circle and it's coming back. The reason why the sites we've got at the moment we're fighting with is because we're given those sites to show people what it was they had. And we've got a couple of sites, one I hope to talk about, which is the Standing Stone site in the set, which proves not only what we were given, but they gave us the actual scriptures and teachings on what to do to get there. They left a how-to manual, a 101 manual that anybody could understand. And right now, every level of government in Australia are doing everything they can to stop this site to become resurrected because they don't want the truth out. So it doesn't matter how they do it. They're very fearful at the moment, and they're trying to lie to us. And what we're trying to do eventually is to tell the whole world there are sites in Australia that are the beginning of humanity, and it tells us how we should be. And that's very important.
So let's talk a little bit about, you talked about the Standing Stones, which is the Australian version of what you related it to as the Stonehenge.
Yes.
It's a henge. And by the way, we're discovering that there's a lot of henges around the globe that we weren't privy to before, but we are seeing them all across, the globe. Not to say that they're older than yours. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that is indicative of some kind of sacred sites, and they had it planet wide. So it's.
Yes, I did.
So it was to be shared. It's information to be shared. And, I really am very thankful for the internet. It was like this explosion. And then of course, we've got all these satellites, and you've got, private people who are out there, looking at, what's going on, on the ground, geologically speaking, as well as, archaeologically speaking. And they're coming out and telling their stories. Unfortunately, mainstream, as we know, aren't picking up the stories. But the more these stories are out there, the better opportunity somebody has of stumbling across them, because I'm going to tell you, there's more seekers out there than we even understand. There's people that are unhappy, and they don't understand why they're unhappy, and they're seeking, and until something comes into their space, they don't know what it is they're seeking. It's that missed part of that, what I call the magic, the spiritual magic, and I think magic is nothing more than science that we don't yet understand, that it is an inherent birthright, if you will, of humans. I've taught that for a very long time, that anybody has the skills to channel or to be psychic or whatever it is that you want to call these things. You just have to develop your own unique talent in that and use those tools that are ours. And we are, it's our inherent right. It's not that some are better than others. So this is really fabulous. You talked about original dreaming stories in this write-up that you gave me. And Keepers of the Old Ways stand united behind one non-earthly standard bearer, the Pleiades. That was a huge statement for me when I read that, because I know there's a lot of people out there that connect with the Pleiadian system. So perhaps you could, use the original dreaming stories and the Keepers of the Old Ways and tie that in together, because you also ended that with, we are truly indeed galactic citizens.
We are indeed. And the Standing Stone site is very much a message from above. And if I can add a little bit to this, the advantage we have with the Standing Stone site is, like all these monuments, the great ones were destroyed. As you know, this is what they do. They cover this up straight away. Now, the beauty with this site was that it was actually worked on by the president of the Australian Archaeological Society, and his offsider was a principal of a high school in the 1930s. Now, a principal of a high school in the 1930s in Australia is one of the most respected citizens you could have within a town. So what we have is impeccable character of two people that aren't hippies, that aren't channelers, that aren't New Age people, that stumbled upon this site. Now, the site, the stones, the 184 stones on this particular site, which is part of a complex of 10 acres, and there are hundreds of stone arrangements and 2 mounds, and you don't make your way on the mound straight away. You've got to go through all the arrangements to make your way up there. This is the major initiation site in Australia. Elders from all over the country, sometimes spending 10 years to get to this site, will walk and do their ceremony on this site. Nowhere else in Australia can that happen. You must do your ceremony that belongs to your land on your site, but this place was different. Now, the reason it was different was because, according to Slater's notes, and we have them, they were hidden until last year, 2 years ago, and were found in a box in the back of an historical society, hidden in a filing cabinet with nothing on it. It sounds like the X-Files, and there's something in that. In it, what we found there was, according to this guy Slater, this is the oldest temple in the world. At least 40,000 years old and much older. He says that it has all knowledge that was, that will be, and that ever existed. He claims that this is a tabernacle that is basically telling us how we should live and what we should do. The mound itself, we've only just discovered the rocks, and we thought the rocks weighed, what, 200 kilos even, maybe 3? Like no, they weigh 6 or 7 ton, and they were moved a massive distance, and original people are supposed to be stick, stone and bone technology and naked. My question is, you got run, boys and girls, how did they move these rocks? There is a mound there of 3,500 cubic meters of agreed to be exotic fill that was brought there before Cook. How did they do this? It's got so much technology that blows people away. And we could go on and talk about that, but what's equally fascinating is because Slater, who was the president, had got a hold of the secret language, and I won't go into the details for that, but it's well proven, of the first language. And our elders still can speak it to this day, and that first language went around the world. That's why there are mounds everywhere and there's stone arrangements, because everyone lived the same way then and no one fought. We've got to understand, warfare is not natural. It was never like this. But irrespective of that, what Slater did is, unlike the mound at Stonehenge, yeah, we've got rocks as big as those, but we got the map. 2 months before it was destroyed, we have a map of where every rock goes. We know the name of each rock in sacred first language, and then we know its meaning. We were given the dance of the stone arrangement and the hand signs by an elder before he passed on. We know where the mound is. We know where the rocks are. We can put this all together and put it back as it was then, because we can sing it back up. But what Evan's going to read to you now is he's going to read a series of quotes that Slater gave that tell us what this mound actually meant, word for word. You don't have that in Stonehenge. We do here.
Right.
So Evan's going to read about 5 or 6 sentences taken from random. He'll read them now, and this will give your listeners an idea of what this mound actually told us. Off you go, mate.
The breath of God is the divine light of the soul. The truth of light flows like a river of fire from God to the soul of man and women united. Enter and learn the divine light. The soul of man comes from immortal light to drink the water of life from God. Life comes in, life goes out, in darkness to the light that holds it forever.
Wow.
And Evan could keep reading those. We've got lots and lots of quotes like that. And I'll just do a very quick plug for our book Out of Australia. But what I want to say about this is the first language. We have speakers today that still know it. It's a secret language held by the elders. Not most original people can't even speak it, but we are lucky. We are working with people that know this language. And you've got to understand something. Go to those so-called textbooks we spoke about before somewhat derisively. Let's look at the development of language. And I can tell you what they tell you, Rebecca. They say that at the very beginning, the first language is crude and basic. If it was done today, it would be sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Then it would have been hunting, shelter, food we eat, and that's about it. You have a list of what's there and what was written there, and I'm going to tell you now, that was when we're at the peak of our form. Don't think today we're at the apex. No, ladies and gentlemen, we're in a trough and we're dragging ourselves out now. We should all be speaking and thinking like those gems of wisdom that were given to us. And here's the beautiful part of this translation. If you read these, you will find time after time these sky heroes, because the original people do not call them gods, they call them sky heroes, came from afar. That quote, ladies and gentlemen, is taken time after time. In fact, Slater said that they came with the sacred means of propagating life. This was in 1939. This is genetic manipulation. Baiami, who was the great creation spirit for original people, he only has one leg, and his footstep is called the Mandawi, because the second leg was cut off to create humanity. The Christians messed that up and made it the rib. Baiami cut one leg off to create humanity. In the story that Slater gives us, It tells us of beings that come from a light far off, and they come to Earth with 7 senses fully developed. Doesn't it say that, Evan?
Yep. And it goes on to say Barney's wife and counterpart, Mulla Mulla,
Oh, Mulla Mulla.
was lifted down alive from a high place. And instead of being made on Earth, she came from the sky above.
Now, remember, this was written in 1939. By the way, I can tell you something about Slater, who was the president. By 1942-43, every record of his work from every university had been deleted. All of his work was destroyed. All of his papers were destroyed. We have his only paper, and it is written Goddard and Slater. And it's stamped cancelled, by the way, but that one got through because Goddard was named first. What he was saying was that we were created from above, and we were genetically created. They manipulated with our genes, and this is pretty radical stuff in 39. Because I doubt there was another academic in the world talking like this. And the reason he spoke like this is because he had the dictionary, and in front of him he had the tabernacle.
Let me interrupt you here. We're going to go on a short break. So I want everyone to stay tuned because, oh my goodness, this is getting great. We're going to have Steve and Evan Strong right back here at Journeys with Rebecca. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hi everyone, welcome back. You're listening to Journeys with Rebecca. Thank you for hanging with us. I have fabulous people here tonight. First, a shout out to JP. Thank you so much for all your hard work in getting this all connected up. To Tobias. Tobias is here with us as well. And our guests tonight are Evan and Steve Strong. And we have been here discussing their newest book, out of Australia. And listen, I have to ask you, you guys were, both of you were referring to kind of like the script that was left for humans, if you will, for us being here. Is there anywhere where you have that written down? Are you allowed to share that in written form before I get you back on track to what we left off talking about?
Yeah, look, they're in our books. We're allowed to put all this information out. You see, about 7 years ago, I was given ceremony by the Ramangeri, and I was given a name to work under, which is called Wirichin. It's a Ramangeri word that means black fella, white fella dreaming, everything together. And what that meant was, from that point on, the take of these elders was there'll be no more secrets. Everything we find, we put up, and that's what we've been asked to do ever since. So yes, we put it up in our book, out of Australia. We put it up in another book called Between a Rock and a Hard Place. We put this stuff up because we're allowed to. There are some original people in Australia, even, aren't there, that aren't happy about it, aren't they?
There's a few.
Oh, there's a few, but the beauty of it is we have so many powerful elders who are standing by us. They whinge and they complain, but they can't do more than that because, as I've said to them, 240 years you guys kept secrets. How's it worked out for you so far in Australia? And they go quiet because it's been a disaster. I said, keeping secrets won't get them to join us. We have to share everything with them. So yeah, it's written everywhere, and it's on our website too. All this sort of stuff we put up straight away. No secrets on our behalf.
Fantastic. I mean, that is, that's, I've always really disliked that about, everyone wants to keep a secret. And I'm like, well, they don't do any favors to anybody at all. At some point the truth comes out and then you've got to deal with, all the falsification up to that point, and it creates more problems than it's worth. And why not just share it right out in the get-go? Exactly. I mean, seriously. Exactly. I mean, that's just the best way. Again, how can you live life intelligently and with, honor and integrity and all of that if what you know has no honor or integrity in it, but that's all you know?
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Exactly.
And that's the point. We have a question before I let you get back to where you were. It went right along with, what you guys were talking about before we went on break. The question are the elders teaching newer generations how to speak that language? You were talking about the original language. Are the elders teaching newer generations how to speak that language?
No, they're not, because it's not something that you get because you're young. You have to earn these things. It's sort of like they are being taught, but once you've gone through processes to get to that stage, the elders teach information piece by piece, like a drip form, don't they?
And then often in a circular fashion.
Oh, yeah.
This big long arc where you don't know where your question's ever going to be answered.
And then 30 minutes in, it turns up again. So no.
Like, oh.
And what happens is that the names we've got are the sacred first names, the first 10 words that all other words come from. There's about 30 suffixes and prefixes that work off these words. They are supposed to be spoken on the mound. And until they're spoken on the mound, people have seen the words, but I've never let them photograph them, have we ever? Never once though, because we've got the copy of the handwritten stuff.
38 hand signs, 21 body parts, 16 letters. That's what Dunlop was talking about with this first language.
The first language has got hand signs, body movements. It's a combination of things, but the sacred 10 words are being taught, but only after you've done all the things that come first, because you have to earn your way to say those words. We would never say them aloud. We've never said them aloud on any media thing, and we won't. But once we put the mound back together and the words are uttered for the first time, I'm not so sure then. I think then they're back out in the earth. They're on the planet and they're floating. Then those words may be allowed to be taught then, and maybe others can learn to say them. But until the mound is reconstructed, I really believe personally those words can't be uttered anywhere but on the mound. And once that's done, then we can look further.
So do you expect that to ever be done?
Well, I've spent, and Evan's spent, and I've got others, we've spent the last 4 months fighting every level of government, every department, every official. I'm waiting on responses today. Every politician saying, come on, somebody help us. And they all run around and say, one group said, we'd love to stand behind you. And I found out behind was about 15 Ks behind when we asked for a question. Help, wasn't there?
They should have given us a pair of binoculars.
Yes, we could have just seen them in the distance when we asked for help. Everyone runs around. See, the problem is it breaks up so many paradigms. They already know this. It breaks up so many rules about prehistory and the past. The politicians really aren't comfortable with this. They don't want to go near it. They keep saying go to a department. The department says go to a politician. They're all running around in circles.
Sure,
well, let's not talk about that for too long because I'll get frustrated because we're still doing it, waiting on people today.
Well, let's talk about the genetics. Let's talk about what you discovered. That's a real fascinating topic. Unless, of course, you have some other things that you want to bring up first before we get to the genetics.
After all, it's funny because I just said to Evan, you do one and I'll do two. And the reason I thought this was we made some pretty radical statements about these aliens coming from afar and coming down and doing this stuff. And I feel like, okay, the original people said that, but there's a lot of people who are mainstream thinkers who want their rational mind appeased, and I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that with 3 studies that have been done recently that completely disprove the out of Africa theory, but some do more than that. And the 2 that come to mind immediately are these. There's been a lot of studies done on a new hominid that nobody knew about until the turn of this century called the Denisovans. Now, they're a hominid that I've seen pictures of them, and if they walk down the street today, Rebecca, you just nod and keep walking. You would not think they're different to us. In fact, the pictures, for God's sake, they look like anyone else. But anyway, somehow or other, scientists claim they're not the same as us. I don't believe them anyway, but here's the trick. They've been around. We found evidence of them in Spain 500,000 years ago, and evidence of them still living in Siberia 16,000 years ago. So they've been around for a long time with Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. We've all been walking around together. But of all the groups, one group has a massive input of Denisovan genes, which are original people. I'm 4.7. Now, original people can go up to 6% Denisovan, which means that 1/20th of me, genetically, is really not Homo sapien. I've got another part in me now. When you get to 5% of something, that's not a trace. And which 5% is it? We don't know, but certainly there's things in me that aren't purely Homo sapiens sapien. But what is really interesting about this is the original people have, the rest of the mob can get up to 2.5%, Europeans about 1%. We go from 3 through to 6, and I've got about the 4th highest reading anywhere on the planet. Now here's the trick. The scientists also tell us they know exactly when the original people and the Denisovans got together. They dated it. And I don't argue this science. I'm all for science. I back it a lot. And it happened 44,000 years ago. Now here's the problem. 44,000 years ago, according to the Out of Africa theory, the Africans had come to Australia and never left. And no one else came here until Cook. That's it. That's the story everywhere. It's sealed off, ladies and gentlemen. No one in, no one out. But 44,000 years ago, the Denisovans that were never in Australia were up close and very personal with the original people. And this wasn't a long-distance relationship. They were making babies, lots of them, because the Denisovan content is so high. Well, my problem is this. How did that happen? They're not supposed to have left Australia. Yet here we are, either the Denisovans have come to Australia and sailed here, and we're told in all the history books only Homo sapien can do this, not a lesser hominid, which meant the original people were sailing around the rest of the world 44,000 years ago. Now, my question is, how did they get there? Now, the obvious one is obviously through boat, and they did that. But now there's a second study that's just turned up, and it's genetic again. And this is where it starts to get really weird, because in this study, we found another genetic component that only belongs to original people. Now, Denisovans, you can find a trace in Asian and a trace in Europeans and nothing in Africans. But in this one, only the original people have this hominid. Now, here's the problem. Our scientists can't find the hominid. They don't know what it is. They can't find it on this planet. There's a genetic pattern in the original people that has been identified as definitely not Homo sapien, it's not Denisovan, it's not Red Deer caveman, it's not Homo enigma, it's not Neanderthal, it's not Cro-Magnon, it's nothing they know. And my question is, well then guys, if you've looked all over the earth and you can't find anyone that put those genes in from this planet, then you better start looking up in the skies because there's nowhere left. Because all the original people will tell us that their countrymen are the Pleiadians. They know that. We have a dreaming story with two rocks that tell us how that actually happened. So what we've got there in two genetic studies is, number one, absolute proof that the story about the original people coming to Australia and staying here and being African is wrong. They went back out to the rest of the world and sailed around there, and they've done that for quite some time. They were all over the place. And secondly, the original people have a genetic code within them that no one else has. Now, I've got to ask the question, if you can't find it now, if they haven't found the hominid now, what are the chances they are going to find it? And if it was that big that all original people have it to today, and I have it too, and I believe all people have it because the original people spread their gene everywhere, so it'll be in everyone, deep down inside, we believe that is the Pleiadian gene that's within us. And just to make one part of this very clear, the Out of Africa theory, just so we can dismiss this fully, Evan found a fascinating piece of work on the walkthrough. It's basically a genetic study of Y chromosomes, because all the other ones are female chromosomes, mitochondrial DNA. And what Evan found, and I'll tell you about it now, is I can tell you Adam and Eve is, Adam is not African. That is now being proven by the top scientists in the world. Evan, could you share with Rebecca what that actual study did?
It was by Kleishoff and Rahansky, and they said basically a more plausible interpretation might have been that both current Africans and non-Africans descended separately from a more common ancestor, thus forming a proverbial fork. A region where this downstream ancestor arose would not necessarily be an African. In fact, it was never proven he ever lived in Africa.
So what they then did was this. That was what they believed. They didn't believe he was African, but they had to prove it. So what they did was they got a hold of thousands of vials of sperm and analysed it to find out where we came from. And this is what they came up with. And no one's challenged this study. No one's challenged it because they can't. It's the best one ever done. They took 400 vials of sperm and did a very intensive match-up. And they looked for 13 distinct African markers. And they figured out the greater the correlation, the better the chance they came from African. Well, the score was this. Out of 5,200 possible hits, they got none. Not one vial of sperm had any African marker in it. In fact, I want to make a point. Do you realize there's only one race on this planet that doesn't have any Neanderthal, doesn't have any Denisovan, doesn't have anything in it, just purely their own genes? That's the Africans. And they're supposed to have been here the longest. Why is it that all the younger races bred with all the other bits and pieces, but the Africans never did? I believe, and we all believe, they're not the oldest race, but the youngest. And that's why their genes are so pure, because they haven't spent time with all the others. They never went near them because they weren't alive then. So we see the opposite. But what we're finding there is if there's no match-up at all in Y chromosomes, and we now know time after time there is no match, no genetic match between original and African mitochondrial DNA, and we now know the mitochondrial DNA of Australians is older. I don't know why people talk about Africa anymore. I think we should just give that up. What people should be looking at now is this set of genes that can't be identified anywhere, that are in original people. And you ask the original people, and every one of them will say, oh, that's easy. That's our Pleiadian genes. Why aren't those scientists now, because they haven't got an answer, if we're talking about original genes, and they say we don't know where they come from, why don't they do the clever thing and go and ask the people who own the genes? Ask them, guys, we can't get an answer. Since your genes, and you have the oldest culture in the world, and everyone agrees with that, don't they, Evan?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone says it's the oldest culture in the world. Well, wouldn't you ask these people, if they have the oldest culture, who were you guys sleeping with that we don't know about? And do you know what? They'll tell you. They'll tell you, oh, it's the Pleiadians. You know what the science will do then? They'll walk away and they won't listen, won't they, Evan?
Oh, they're good at that.
Oh, they're good at that. They'll say, that's not the answer we wanted. We don't want that one, so we'll walk away.
I've got a good quote from someone that found something out from David Rush.
Oh, yeah. And there is one last one, and we'll close with this. It was a study that's been done. It was just released last year, so we wouldn't have mentioned it earlier. It was done by 6 universities in America and South America. One was Harvard, and the head researcher was David Reich. And what they did was they looked at the mitochondrial DNA, which is the women's side again, because we like to do both sides of the equation, of 2 remote tribes in the Amazon that would not breed with anyone but themselves. And their thinking was, is because they're cut off and because their genetic line has stayed pure, we'll be able to find out where the first people in America came from.
Keeping in mind, when they got their results, they spent a very long time trying to make the results go away.
Yes.
It's not what they wanted.
They actually said time after time, the results are no good. We'll do it again and get it fixed up. And every time they said the answer got stronger. They found the closest genetic link in the world to the Amazonian Indians that are kept away from everyone, of course, was Australia. And they couldn't work out why. They went over and over and they said, oh, we give up. Yep, they're Australian. David Wright says, I was a believer in the one theory in original Amerindians coming in 12,000 years ago. I believed in that strongly. He said it's wrong. You guys have got it all wrong. The original people came here way, way back. And we know we've done a lot of work in America, and we're getting dates of human presence in America that go back 500,000 years. The original people and the American Indian people are probably the 2 closest groups to each other when it comes to keeping the genetic line and the spiritual line intact. So we know there's a strong connection, and it is still there to this very day. There are American Indian people of this day that still have the genes of original people within them. The Euro, the Patagonians, they had the genes. The Parakew, they were enormously black, naked, did not wear bows and did not use bows and arrows, but used a spear thrower like the original people and had a different language. And they were around when the Spanish were there. So we have a strong connection. And what that teaches us is 2 things. Number 1, the original people spread all the way around the world, spreading their genetic legacy and the Pleiadian legacy. And secondly, now that we've identified the magic set of genes, They are not from this planet. And there's not one scientist in the world that can find a link between some of my genes and my son's genes here and any human or hominid or semi-hominid or primate or even a horse. It's not there. It just isn't there. There's something unusual about this country that doesn't make sense. And if I can close, let's do a dog. Oh, we should, shouldn't we?
The not dog.
The not dog. We have a dog. It's not a dog and it's not a wolf. It's been proven as neither, called the dingo in Australia. And Sydney Uni did a mitochondrial DNA study on that to find out what it was related to. And you know what they found? It's not related to any dog, any wolf, anything on this planet again. It's such a pattern in Australia that even the dingoes have genes that don't belong to this planet. So what have we got there? We've got the dingo, which is not related to any dog or wolf on this planet. We now have the original people with a set of genes we can't find on this planet. This is science, ladies and gentlemen. It's not us channeling this. It's not even the stories of the original people that tell us the same thing. What it's telling us is this. There is something in Australia that does not belong to this planet. And it's now part of our ancestry. And that's part of the story that people need to understand. That we are not, like you said before, we have to stop behaving like environmental vandals of this planet and realize we are actually genetically galactic citizens. They know it, and we should know it. And I can tell you now, the American Indians know it, the original people know it, and many indigenous people around the world still know this story. That's part of what we need to know. Okay. I think we're cut out.
I'm sorry. I had my mute muted again.
Oh God, I thought we.
No. I do it at least once a show, just so you know.
It keeps us on our toes.
I get so mesmerized I forget that I have put my mute button on while I'm listening. I've had the distinct pleasure of having on a Native American gentleman. His name is Robert Morningsky, and he speaks of the Star Peoples, and he speaks of very similar things that you do in regards to the history of this planet. And he's a fascinating man, and he comes under, obviously will come under a lot of lamb blasting, people, just really degrading him and doing that, because his stories are just not used to what we're used to, having regurgitated to us as a whole, as humanity as a whole. And I always thought that there was just so much more to the story. And here you are from a whole different, continent across the pond, shall we say, way across the pond. And you're saying very similar things in many respects as what he does. Now, he's not into the archaeological information like you are, but he is very much in touch with the elders, what he calls the elders. And it's my understanding that he's been all over this globe, speaking to the elders, and the elders are giving him the information that he's now allowed to be, putting out into public. But he has to get permission to do this. This sounds very much like, what you've had to do. And he's Native American. I mean, he's indigenous peoples. And, he still had to work for the right to do this. Just like you're saying that you have to work for the right to, learn this language and whatever it is else that they share, a question that you have to ask, and it takes you on this very circuitous way, to get an answer. It's never just forthright. They can make you work for it, because that's what we have to do. We have to stretch. We have to stretch because we're pretty lazy as a species anymore, because so much stuff has just been kind of force fed to us, and we haven't had to think about anything. Everything's been thought for us, and that's, why we're in the predicament that we're in as far as this planet is concerned, and as far as our species is concerned. And I'm talking about all of humanity. That being said, there was another thing I was watching last night, and maybe you can speak to this and maybe you can't. But they have found some skeletons, some skulls and skeletons that the remains are just extremely old, and they aren't exactly human. They're not inhuman, but they're not exactly human. But they've done some genetic testing on them, very, very heavy duty testing on them, and found that they really aren't of this planet at all. I mean, they don't fit into any criteria whatsoever. Do your people your elders that you speak to, do they talk about any of the, I guess, evidence, so to speak, of other beings being here that could back up some more additional scientific data that you guys are collecting?
Yeah, they do. We were both smiling when you said that at the time because, straight away we both probably thought, I know you're thinking Ros's Rock 1 and 2, aren't you, Evan?
Yes.
Yeah, we both thought of the same thing. Yeah, I can share that with you. Look, your listeners would have to look at the rocks. We've got them up on our website. It's called Ros's Rock 1 and 2. Ros's Rock 1 is at least, it's way over 10, it was buried 10,000 years ago. It has markings on it that you could not do today. It would need the highest level of technology on the planet to create what's on that rock. Now, the elders knew that we had this rock for what? A long time, didn't they, Evan?
Yeah.
And Kano knew about it. In fact, I had a phone call when I mentioned before that lady that rang from 3,000 k's away. She rang about that rock. Okay? Everyone rings about that rock. Now, the reason they did is I'll tell the story that they told me because, again, our job is to pass on what the elders who know the old ways tell us. And that particular rock, it took 1.5 years when Kano finally, and we signed a formal contract with the Ramajeri about that rock, didn't we, Evan?
We did.
The only rock we signed a proper contract with about that one rock. And what it tells us is this. Kano told me that this is a story about way back in the very beginning when Goanna. Now remember, original people always talk about people in their totem form because they believe that animals are equal to people. I know that's a radical comment, but that's the way they see things. So Goanna in our society is the bringer of wisdom. Along with the rainbow snake, they're the ones who enlighten. Now the Goanna was in a spaceship coming from afar from the Pleiades and came to the Earth and came to the original people and asked to join us. And the answer was no. And the eagle and the crow, which represent the original people, the crow being wise and the eagle having power, fought against the Pleiadians, against the Goanna, and held them at bay. Held them at bay for quite some time. I want to make this point, was made very clear to me. Don't look upon the Pleiadians as God incarnate as humans. They are extremely wise, but they're not perfect, and they sought out the original people because they saw that they were their equals. This gets lost in translation a lot. It's not as if we became enlightened once we had those Pleiadian genes. We already had that inclination. But what took place after the fight was going on for quite some time, the crow, the wise one, realized that for the betterment of the original people, the Pleiadians must come. So he joined up with the Goanna and fought the eagle and defeated them. And then the Goanna came down with his beings, the Pleiadians, and met, and they decided they would work together. But as a trophy of that victory, of course, you don't kill the other person here. We don't do it quite like that. We fight when it's over, it's finished. We don't put the boot in. The eagle had to give the Goanna something of his as a token of that victory, and he gave him the claws. And those claws were then taken and put on the Goanna, and then he scratched all his laws onto that first rock. So the original people believe to this day that that rock is a Pleiadian testament of them coming here and writing down their laws. And then Kano made this very clever statement. And he said, then the whitefellas took that story of the laws scratched onto a rock, and they took it to Mount Sinai and turned it into the 10 Commandments. He said, but we have the 10 Commandments on that rock. And that tells us what the Pleiadians brought us. And we know the story of what they brought on that rock. And on Ros's Rock 2, the second rock, it tells of the humans and their role there. And what we find is that the Pleiadians bring 2.5 languages here, and the original people already had 4.5, and that makes the 7 forms of communication together. And together, when you put those 2 rocks together, you have the complete creation that the Pleiadians wanted. You see, they believe that the Earth is an integral part of their history also. And they seeded this planet, and we have the rock for that one, don't we, Evan?
We do.
We have the rock that tells us when they seeded the planet and threw a big spear, which is Uluru, and seeded. And then they waited for life to begin. And then when a hominid, or Homo sapien, I don't like that word because it means wise, and I don't see that, but when one hominid showed enough spiritual integrity and wisdom, that's when they came. Now, my understanding is that the Pleiadians and the original people, that is why the Pleiadian genes were put inside us, and that's why the original people went out to the rest of the world to spread their genes so that every human being on this planet has Pleiadian genes inside them. Now, they may have compliant genes that have been given by another mob from somewhere else. We don't talk about them because we only talk about the Pleiadians here. But what we do know is that the Pleiadian genes are the ones that make you go walkabout, where you go and find things yourself, where you go off on your own and find your own wisdom. The other genes tend to be more follow the sheep. So we've got within us both sets of genes. And today, we believe the Pleiadian genes are now stirring inside every human on this planet. And that's why we've got to make a decision. Do we go Pleiadian way or do we go the other way? So to an extent, yes, their belief in Pleiadian involvement is absolute. In fact, we do not know an elder of the old way that will not now force us to talk about the Pleiadians. You see, for the first 3-4 years we never spoke about
UFOs. I think I lost you there.
No word. Our first 3 books
you're
were
breaking
published
up a
by
little
University
bit
Press of America,
Steve,
and in it,
Evan,
we never mentioned UFOs. We never mentioned any of that stuff. We only did this because they forced us into it. I remember when they first mentioned this, I said, we're not going to touch it. I did tell Peter at the time when I was giving ceremony, he said, you're going to have to talk about that stuff. I said, no way, mate. When you do that, they attack you en masse. I said, we don't need that. Strange, isn't it?
And here we go.
And here we are talking about it all the time because we don't have a choice. They just keep going on and on about the Pleiadians. So yes, it is in their culture. It is the only dreaming story in Australia that goes to all 500 tribes. And in it, it is always the 7 sisters of the Pleiades and Orion, chasing the 7 sisters and trying to get up close and friendly. That is the same dreaming story everywhere, and they always come to this planet. So, yes, it is absolutely inculcated, just like you were talking about Morning Cloud, who we've used in our books, haven't we, Evan?
Yeah.
Yes, I know fully who he is. He's dead set right. All of the old people that know the old way know that these people came, and we all need to know it. We all have to know it.
Yeah, it's beautiful confirmation that, you know, here you are in Australia and then here he is, and having conversations with both of you men, or all 3 of you actually, and pulling in the story. And I mean, there's just so much that, you know, parallels each other, and certainly telling it in your own words, but there's so much that the stories that both of you share and information that you share that parallels each other. It's just amazing. We actually have a couple of questions. You okay with me breaking this in for a minute and getting some questions to you guys?
Yeah, go for your life, yeah. By all means.
The first question is, with respect to origins, do you think that the differences between various human groups on this planet are a result of being from various places besides the Pleiades?
Yes, absolutely. Look, honestly, look at all the cheetahs on the world. They all look exactly the same, right? Look at all the golden Labradors. They all look exactly the same. Look at all people. Fair dinkum, no 2 look the same. We are, as one elder put it to us, this is a dog's breakfast of genes. Yes, different places have been, look, the Pleiadians have been here, the Syrians have been here, there's a whole mob that have been here, and they've all been actively involved in what's going on here. In fact, I do remember, I can actually give you the reason why they came, which is just as important, because I do remember on one stage, we sat down before, we've lost a lot of our elders recently, haven't we, Evan? They're all dying. We sat next to Marbuk just before he passed on. And I remember he started talking exactly like this again. And at one stage I cut him off and I said, Marbuk, I hear all this stuff. I hear you all mob telling this all the time, but I've got to ask you a question. I said, the last 7,000 years, you look around here. This place has been an absolute a warfield. All we've ever been doing is killing one another, destroying the environment, fighting against nature, fighting against each other, giving no respect to the water, no respect to the air, no respect to anything. I said, why would they come? I don't get it. I can't see these intelligent beings from elsewhere spending all this time to get here. I said, what have we got to offer them? And I thought it was a legitimate question. The answer shocked me. He said to me, he said, go back, and I'm going to use the word American again, go back to American fiction, go back to the very first time an alien was depicted on TV or in the movies as helping humans. He said, I want you to think about that person. And I looked at him and I thought, who the hell is he talking about? And I'm thinking, no, it's probably not Predator. It's probably not Alien from Sigourney Weaver's piece. They don't look very nice. Avatar, well, that blue thing wanted to eat everyone and kill us all. And then he told me, it's Dr. Spock. Now, I've been told Gene Roddenberry said he was channeled Dr. Spock's role and what he was about. And he said to me, he said that all of the aliens are varying degrees of Dr. Spock. He said, think about what Dr. Spock was bemused by humans and their emotions, the love, the hate, and the irrationality of humans. He just couldn't work it out. He kept shaking his head. He just couldn't work out where we were coming from. He tried to understand it, but couldn't. He said, this is what this is about. He said, this planet, Gaia, is the strongest planet in the cosmos that radiates love, which is the most powerful force in the universe. He said, we live on a planet of love. And he said, all the other aliens come here because this is where it's at its strongest. And they know that somewhere bound within this is their future. He said, some try to cut us up and look inside to find out where it is. Others don't want to touch us and keep away and they've been told not to get involved. All of them do different things, but they come for that, to understand love. Wow. He said, because humans alone would lay down their life for another person, for pure love, for no other reason than that. He said they wouldn't do that. They'd think it would be, as Dr. Spock would put it, illogical.
Logical.
It doesn't make sense. So he said that's why they came. Yes, they did, and they're all here, and the person who asked that question is spot on. They've all got involved in this because they all believe it's part of their future, and they've all come. So I believe the fact that we've got different races that look different from each other is because we're all Homo sapien, but they've put their genes into. They've put their genes in, and we see them. And then those genes can mix with other genes. So somebody can be part Eurasian, can be part Negro, can be part anything now. And it all still fits in perfectly. But we are not like cheetahs. We're not like golden retrievers. We're not like any other animal on this planet. Because when you think about a human face, what is it? 2 eyes, 1 nose and a mouth. How come every one of them's different? How could that be? It doesn't happen for the other animals, but it does for us. Yeah, there's more to it. Don't believe the scientists. They don't understand how we came about. Because unless you put those aliens' dog's breakfast of genes, as I was told, into this equation, remember, they're all part of that dog's breakfast, so they're not going to look the same. That's the only way humans make sense to me.
Absolutely fantastic. And a lot of that stuff that you were just talking about just gave me the, just set really well. I mean, it's just confirmation of a lot of other people that have come on and had bits and pieces. As I've always said, I think we're all carriers of information, and we all carry a little piece of the puzzle, and it's about putting those pieces together and makes that puzzle bigger and more understandable. And certainly, for many people, it spurns them on to do more research, to do more investigation, and to do more insightful, exploration, to really figure this out for those that are really, on this path. We have one other question that came in. Again, right along with the Pleiades. What planet and star of the Pleiades have you been told what planet and what star of the Pleiades that they originally come from?
Great question, and let me congratulate the questioner, because for the first time ever in my existence, this is true, isn't it, Evan?
It is, actually. I'm just running it through my head the last 50 years
You've done me in here. Whoever that person is, you get a huge tick. I can't answer that question. It's the first time I've ever been asked a question I can't answer. I don't know which one it is. I know the person who would know. It'd be Brendan Murray, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he would know.
Brendan would know, because he was the one who told us that we know about the seeding. He was aware of that. He would know that. And also, the lady that just rung from Kangaroo Island about 2 weeks ago, she is the keeper of the story, the song, and the ochre of the Seven Sisters. She would know, and I'll tell that person, I will ask her when she rings, because you can't ask this sort of lady any question. She rings you. She did give me her phone number, and I'll put that on the list as a question I should ask, because there are some people who know that, but we're not one of them. So well done. That's my first pass ever. I'll go back and have salt now.
Oh, that's well, it came from one of the audience people. I didn't think of that. But somebody was thinking that, no, that's great. Because the other thing I wanted to share with you guys here too is that I had a couple people already respond and say we must have them back on again. So this is an invitation that later on this year I would love to invite you two back on. And we'll have some further discussions, because what we're having here tonight is an extraordinary conversation for sure. But we are talking about layers upon layers upon layers that we haven't even touched yet. And, really drill down into it. And it just doesn't seem like there's enough time. As I wrote to you in Skype, I said, I don't think 10 hours would be enough to, go for all the information that could be shared in regards to what you're talking about.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have spent all these years looking for this stuff and researching and gathering and doing the work and all of that. I mean, there's so many small things that add up into these bigger things that you're, putting together, and you've compiled into this book, which, by the way, we want to go ahead and make mention of. It's available where? Where can people get this book from before I forget?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can probably go to the publisher's website as well.
Hampton Road.
Yeah, Red Wheel Wiser Books, Hampton Roads. When I last looked, it was available there. Plus, your usual spots like Amazon, which is where a lot of people get their books these days.
They do, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's all around, yeah. I hope it's doing fairly well for our sake. Nothing else.
Well, I hope so too, because it's fantastic information. So again, the book is out of Australia. Aborigines, The Dreamtime and the Dawn of the Human Race, by Stephen and Evan Strong. Again, you can find it on Amazon. I'm actually looking at it right now. I clicked on your book cover on your site, and it took me right to it. So it's there. Very inexpensive, by the way. I think that's really great. It's awesome pieces of information. And I was so hoping to get it, because it was just like so much information.
Yeah, so were we, by the way. We're so hoping to get it to you. We did ask, but it's one of those things where,
I call it the new, yeah, it's okay. It's the new normal, man. Things just don't go as planned, and it's okay. But their website is ForgottenOrigin.com. There's pictures of those rocks that they were talking about today on the show. And some other pieces of information that you also brought up during parts of the show is on your website. So that's absolutely Fantastic information, by the way. I like what you've done with your website in showing, all of these different pieces of artwork and things like that. So let's have you guys, we've got about 10, 12, 14 minutes, something like that. I'm not quite sure. Somewhere between 10 and 12 minutes left of the show. So I know that there was so much that we didn't get covered tonight. What else would you like to impart upon the audience, that, goes in line with what we've been kind of chatting about, or maybe you want to expound on something or go on a new tangent altogether of information that's in the book?
Well, two things. I think let's stay a little bit more with the genetics and give you a better feel for what the original people are. And just before we do that, before I forget to mention this, because we've only just put this together in the last couple of days, it looks like there could be a chance we'll be going to America next year. That's possible. And secondly, what we're doing in the meantime is we're going to put up, probably starting next week, we're going to put up information about a webinar we're going to do with quite a few people around here, and sort of bring some of these issues up into a sort of a more user-friendly way. So that's something we're going to do very soon, and we're going to put up information. So keep your eye out for that one, because it's going to be done quickly, and we want to do it cheaply too. We want to try and make sure people can get access to this. We've got to keep it as cheap as we can. But I want to talk about one other thing. We spoke about the fact, I used the word original. And I want to explain to ladies and gentlemen, and this works all around the world, that when we talk about Homo sapiens, we seem to feel like, the Homo sapiens we speak about today. I want to talk about the Homo sapiens that existed in Australia until very recently. And I've got to tell you, it isn't one group. It is not one group of Homo sapiens that were around. This is another point about genetics I get really fed up with. They say, oh, yes, we did a genetic study of the original people. And we always say the same thing. Which group? Now, let me explain what I mean by that. There are the original people you know of today. Okay? They're called the Gracile race. And they've been around here for a long time. But there were researchers that said there's two lineages here. There's more than two. There's also other groups. There are what's called the robust group. Now that group was in Australia. We have skulls that go back 50,000 years, and we have skulls that go back 6,000 years. And at one place at a website at Cow Swamp, we found only robust people being buried there, and about 17 different types of burial techniques, extremely spiritual people, but never bred with a gracile. Now these people had a brain capacity of 1540 cc. I'm 1300, and so's Evan, and so's the gracile. They're smarter. Their temple bone was 18 mils thick. Ours is 2.
The cranium was approximately 110 millimeters long.
Yeah, a massive sized head that sloped back like the cone shape that everyone tried to copy. Think about that for a sec, ladies and gentlemen.
Comparing us to them is like
the skulls.
The skulls. It's
the elongated skulls.
Orange peel and an eggshell. That's the difference between them. Now, they died out. But the point is that 50,000 years ago and 40,000 years ago, in these studies, they were here. And then we have the Berenians, the tiny people, the hobbits that you've heard about recently. We had them. We've got pictures of our tribe of 100 of them that were still walking around in the bush in the 1930s. And we know more about those people, don't we, Evan?
Yes.
Yes, they walked away. There's a picture of Joseph Birdsall in 1938 standing next to the elder of the tribe, and the elder's head was around his waist. And what happened was they got so fed up with whitefellas' ways, they walked off into the bush. And everyone said they disappeared. They didn't.
No.
We now have absolute confirmation they still exist. And you know what the trick with these guys are? Just like Kano. They can disappear when they want. So we'll never catch them. They're too smart for us now. They were considered the masters of camouflage. And whenever there was a fight, always the big people would go and see the little people to sort it out because they had the wisdom. So when we talk about original people, should we be talking about the wise little ones? But it doesn't end there. Evan himself, you've seen the little ones, haven't you, Evan?
Yes, they were cheeky little bastards. They were chasing me. They're around as well. Yeah.
They're about 18 inches, aren't they?
Yes.
And they belong to both sides. then Kano talks about the 4-meter ones, doesn't he, Evan?
Yep.
The tall blue ones that go between dimensions, that come here sometimes and go away. And then we talk about the Yowies, which are these sort of hairy guys that are really tall, and they rip heads off kangaroos when they hunt, and they can kill anyone.
Sasquatch or...
Yeah, they're like a
Yeah.
Sasquatch. So, when we talk about original people, which one are you talking about when you would do your genetic studies? You see, the scientists are really making a huge mistake here. And they do it with all indigenous people. And it's very important we close with something like this. They go into site, the archaeologist, and they have their clipboard, they have their measuring devices, and they're going to try and analyze societies that live for the spiritual, that believe in the mystical, that believe that the rocks that we have can talk to them, which they can, that believe that all of the mystical things and the paranormal things that are called paranormal, because they don't think they're normal, are actually normal, and that humans are magical beings. And then these people with their clipboards come away and they say, well, they didn't wear clothes. They must be ignorant. No, they didn't wear clothes and they didn't have machinery because they didn't want the bloody thing. They felt that they would be better living with nature and being more fulfilled. This was a society when we got here where every human being believed in the Creator. And every human being believed that the spirits were watching them every second of the day. And if they did something wrong, they would be betrayed. This was a society where if you broke the law, the worst punishment you could ever be given was freedom. If you really broke a really important spiritual law, they would tell you to leave your country here, your home country, and never come back. And you would think, I've escaped. But they knew that when they die, their soul would want to reincarnate back on their home country. And because they didn't die on their home country, their soul would be lost for an eternity. So if I was being punished in an Aboriginal court, and I had two choices, freedom or death through spearing, I would beg to be speared. Now, the reason I would beg that is because I know I will come back in spirit form and I will come back in my body again. Now, if you live in a society where everyone understands why you're here and what the process is, guess what? You have enlightenment. That is what we're on about here. Yes, we're on about the amazing technology that proves us at one stage way back, the original people were the masters of technology. And now they're the paupers. And everyone has judged them poorly and said you didn't even invent the bow and arrow. Well, that's wrong too, because Cook wrote in his diary, he saw it here. But that's another story. What people need to understand is that the original people were the intellectual aristocrats of the golden age. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is not the golden age. And let me close, because I know we're running out of time, with something from today to tell you where we've got to today. That's what it used to be like. And I want to close with something I've used many times because I was there when it happened. And that mate of mine called Binner and I were on a train in Melbourne, lost, trying to get to the place to talk, and we didn't know where we were. And we're talking to each other, trying to work out what to do. And we're in a train where 4 carriages were open, and there were about 80 people there, and there wasn't one person talking. All of them had their electronic pacifiers, those machines where you press buttons and you talk into them. By the way, I'm a Luddite. And they were talking to their machines with their finger, and they were playing games. And I thought to myself, but they're not talking to each other. They're sitting here now in this train going to work, and they're not humans anymore. They're robots. They're clones. And then all of a sudden what happened was we're talking to each other saying we're lost. And 2 people put down their machines and started talking to us. And then 2 more joined in. And before you know it, there was something radical taking place on this train. There was a conversation between humans taking place. And then when we left, got off the plane, because we're on the wrong train, of course, we got off and we looked back. And all of those 6 people picked back up their pacifiers and they went back to the accepted way of living. And I've got to tell you, if that's the future, stop the world, I want to get off, because it's no good. It just isn't any good. If that's what's going to happen in the future, where we all just sit there compliantly, press the buttons, do what we're told, go back and then sit at home at night and come back the next day to work to wait until we die, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And what I'm saying to everyone is the original people and the indigenous people offer something new, and we should grab it.
Oh my gosh. Stephen, Evan, thank you so much. We're going to have you on again very, very soon, I promise. What a fantastic show and information. Thank you, JP and Tobias. And for all of you, thank you for joining in. Until we meet again, where will your life's journey lead you? Many blessings and good night.